Welcome to another series of the Poltergeist Project, episode 1 of the Wyke Poltergeist. I can't believe this is series 5 already. Gosh. A huge thank you to everyone who's been here from the start. I know there's a few of you out there, and hello to any first time listeners. My name's Stephen Miller. I'm a historian with a fascination for all things paranormal. I started this podcast in early 2026 as an outlet and a bit of a purpose, really, for my spooky research. I've investigated hundreds of incidents of poltergeist phenomena, and to be honest, I can account for the vast majority, maybe 95%, as human behaviour, mischief and hoaxes, or misinterpretation and psychology. Those that I select to research for the Poltergeist Project for a whole series are really the elite, the weirdest of the weird, totally beyond rational explanation. Well, almost. Sometimes. If you listen to previous series, you'll know I'm a skeptic who would love to be proven wrong. So far, I've got a 50-50 record for finding rational explanations for the cases I've covered. Before I get into this story for this series, a bit of housekeeping, especially for the new listeners. I research, record, and release these episodes as I go along. As always, I've got absolutely no idea what direction my research into the Wyke Poltergeist will take me, what I might find, or what my conclusions might be. This is a historical, investigative podcast, warts and all. I might make some mistakes along the way, but rest assured, I'll correct them as I go. I also record the episodes in one take and release them raw, no editing, no sound effects, no spooky music. Now, I know this isn't to everyone's taste, but to be honest, it's the only way I would have time to do this podcast, how I want to do it, and to give each case the level of research I believe they deserve. Now, in terms of research, I've got an exciting update at the end of the episode. I'm going on a research trip, which will feed into this series, an earlier series, and hopefully future ones as well. So stick around for that. For this series, the Wyke Poltergeist, we're returning to West Yorkshire, where I live. Also the location for the first series, Keighley. But this is a very different case. The story of a haunted house. Wyke is a village in between Huddersfield and Bradford, only a few miles east of Halifax. It was, like lots of West Yorkshire, a bit of an industrial powerhouse at the time of our story in 1909. I'll get more into the context in later episodes, but for this case, I wanted to start with a detailed account of the phenomena first. I usually dive into the historical context first, but it's been mentioned that sometimes I don't give the same focus and attention to the actual phenomena, so I'm trying things a little bit differently this time. In this case, that's actually not that easy. It received a lot of press attention, and they all retell the same story in slightly different ways. And of course, they have an inclination, being the press, to exaggerate. But for what I have ascertained from lots of reports, here's what actually happened. It all started in the very early hours of Sunday, the 6th of June, 1909. A loud knocking was heard in the home of Mrs. Priestley, an 82-year-old widow living with her 2 adult daughters and a granddaughter on Church Street in Wyke. The banging sounded like a hammer and was so loud it even woke the neighbours. And this wasn't a terraced house, it was detached, with an alley between it and the neighbouring property. So it was clearly pretty loud. There was no obvious source to be found inside or outside the house. Mrs. Priestley slept downstairs due to her age and struggling with the stairs. It was actually the house's main parlour at the front, the living room, but she had a bed in there as well. The following morning, around 11 a.m, the neighbour, Mrs. Smith, who is described as a middle-aged, sensible woman, came round to ask about the noises in the night. They sat together and chatted in Mrs. Priestley's room, but neither could offer an explanation for the noises. After a short while, Mrs. Smith was leaving when Mrs. Priestley called her back. The room they'd just been sitting in moments earlier was in total chaos. No one else had been in. Furniture was toppled over, clothes strewn around. The pillows had been moved from one end of Mrs. Priestley's bed to the other. A chair and a small table were on top of the bed, and ornaments from the mantelpiece, including a bust of the romantic poet Byron, were on the floor but not broken. It looked as though they'd been placed there gently, rather than fallen or knocked off. The women, assisted by Mrs. Priestley's daughters, tidied the room and went into the kitchen for a cup of tea, as you do. They then heard an almighty crash from the parlour and returned to again see it in disarray. As they tidied for a second time, they heard furniture in the kitchen moving and cooking utensils clattering around. Exhausted, Mrs. Priestley sat in her rocking chair by the bed, whilst the others continued to tidy. After sitting for a while, a cushion from the sofa 4 feet away lifted and flew across the room, hitting Miss Priestley in the face. Mrs. Smith picked it up, put it back, but it did it again. After a third slap in the face from the cushion, Mrs. Priestley, understandably alarmed, decided to leave the room. But further activity continued. Cushions moved around, and a cane chair was particularly lively as it danced around the room and flipped over. Mrs. Smith decided to take the chair into the kitchen, worried that it was somehow the source of the problem, and then she sat on it to try and keep it still. A very practical solution to the problem of moving furniture. Whilst talking in the kitchen, they heard yet more crashes from the parlour and rushed in to find it trashed once more. One of Mrs. Priestley's daughters then shouted, "Your chair's running down the garden!" And they all saw it fall down the steps from the back door into the garden. Then, while stood in the hallway in shock, a heavy doorstop, weighing around 7 kilos, so over a stone, began to dance around Mrs. Priestley and Smith before toppling over. Mrs. Smith's husband, alerted by the commotion, then called round. On going to answer the door, Miss Dutton, a visiting granddaughter of Mrs. Priestley, tripped over a roll of carpet that had previously been tucked behind a chair. She picked it up, replaced it, and answered the door. Mr. Smith then witnessed the roll of carpet moving along the floor and again positioning itself near the door. Back in the kitchen, Miss Dutton's hat and cloak flew off a peg and again hit Mrs. Priestley. Miss Dutton took this as her cue to leave. Poor Mrs. Priestley. I mean, the 82-year-old is certainly taking the brunt of the activity here. It actually reminds me a bit of the last series, the Edinburgh Poltergeist, which involved an 86-year-old widow being terrorised by moving household items. I think there's a few things here that I will come back to later in terms of comparisons, especially between, I think, Sunderland and Edinburgh in terms of the series. And then finally, as though nothing had even happened, the house was quiet. All the activity, which filled pages of newspaper columns, had probably taken over less than an hour. The family thankfully slept that Sunday night peacefully and undisturbed. However, the word was out. Wyke had its own real-life haunted house. Hundreds of people began to gather outside, trying to catch a glimpse of a flying chair or to talk to the family. The story appeared in newspapers all over the country. The Bradford Daily Telegraph, Halifax Evening Courier, Shipley Times, Leeds Mercury, Yorkshire Evening Post, Bolton Evening News, Midlands Counties Tribune, North Wales Weekly, Londonderry Standard, Dundee Weekly, Lloyd's Weekly, and so on and so on. It was a sensation. Many of them sent their own reporters to the scene, which only added to the hype, but thankfully for me, provides a huge amount of source material. The next day, Monday morning, just before 12 o'clock, Mrs. Priestley was hit in the face, or maybe the shoulder. The reports differ, this time with a flying brush. And the crazy chair? It had been brought back in from the garden, but again it began to dance around the kitchen. Enough was enough. The family needed help. Who you going to call? Seth Butler, Mrs. Priestley's 78-year-old brother-in-law, a no-nonsense, ardent skeptic. In a varied career, he'd been a farmer, a police constable, and a butcher before he retired. He's described in the press as being a strong, burly man of the finest type of Yorkshireman with a butcher's nerves. Now, I like the sound of this guy. I'm getting strong Sean Bean vibes from him. He walked the few miles from his house, and he fought his way through the crowds of onlookers. After speaking with the family, he volunteered to sit in vigil all night to get to the bottom of what was exactly going on here. So he sat, alone in the kitchen, reading and smoking his pipe by candlelight with a lamp at the ready. And then, at 1 a.m., a knocking sound came from the hallway. Mrs. Priestley woke, and her and Mr. Butler went towards the noise and found that again the heavy doorstop had moved several feet down the hallway. They then turned around to find pieces of soap at the bottom of the stairs. Mr. Butler took the soap back to its usual place in the upstairs bathroom, but over the course of an hour it came back down the stairs 4 times, apparently of its own accord. On the last time they heard it, landing with a soft tap, tap, tap on each step as it came. It was followed by a cloth, a towel, and a metal jug, which made a loud clattering and woke the whole household. Mr. Butler rushed upstairs just in time to catch a wooden towel rail that was itself about to topple down the stairs. He then conducted a room-by-room search and found nothing untoward. There had been rumours that maybe there was somebody else in the house doing all this activity. Seems unlikely. It wasn't a big house. I'm sure you would have spotted another person in the room with you, but it was certainly a theory at the time. Now, Mr. Butler had had enough of this nonsense, and he decided to address the poltergeist directly. Is there anything else to come down? I've had enough of this. I'm tired. If you have anything to say it now, because I am ready to hear you. Silence. That was it. There was no further activity reported. I've heard a few different ways of dealing with a poltergeist, but on this occasion, a stern Yorkshire telling off was all that was needed to lay it to rest. Now, at face value, some of the activity is literally paranormal, unexplainable by known science. But as always, the phenomena is only half the story. Who were these people, and what was going on locally that might offer some insight into this case? It was so widely reported that I've got lots of material to go through. Every newspaper reporter got a slightly different angle, spoke to different people and witnesses, and brought their own biases into it. The haunted house of Wyke was a national sensation. The local vicar, police constable, an important local spiritualist couple, and some random German guy all called on the house to offer their assistance and insight. Lots to be done. But I have uncovered one thing already about the hero of our story, Seth Butler. There might have been another reason they called him to help, not just because he was a no-nonsense burly Yorkshireman. It turns out this wasn't his first rodeo. He had had first-hand experience with the paranormal before. Specifically, in his youth, he had an encounter with the Beely Boggart. Now, Boggart is an old English term for a poltergeist-type mischievous spirit. Don't think the Harry Potter shape-shifting creature thing. And Beely is just a few miles from Wyke. It does seem like Wyke and the surrounding area was, and maybe still is, a bit of a hotspot for paranormal activity, particularly hauntings. There's even a very famous, well, I say very, probably quite famous, headless horseman called Captain Bevers, or in Yorkshire dialect, Bevers Bart Ted, which translates as Bevers without a head. So, I've got some local and family history to do, as well as some paranormal folklore research, which is new. I hope all this will feed into a better understanding of the phenomena described, which, at the moment, I would say still defies logical explanation. At the start of this episode, I mentioned a research trip that I've got planned, and I'm very excited about this. Since Series 1, The Keithley Poltergeist, I've been desperate to visit the archive of the Society for Psychical Research. The SPR was founded in London in 1882 and was the first scientific organisation set up specifically to examine claims of paranormal phenomena. It's still going strong today. Their archive is held at Cambridge University, and this weekend I'm going down to take a look. I have my train tickets booked, my reader's card on order, and the lovely staff at the Special Collections team of the University Library are getting the files ready for me. I feel like Mulder, going down to the FBI basement and being given access to the X-Files for the first time. These really are the Poltergeist X-Files of the UK. I've requested to view the files of 10 historic poltergeist cases, including Wyke and Keithley. Others include, as far as I know, entirely forgotten cases from Oxfordshire, South London, Lincolnshire, Perthshire, Essex, and more. Within the files are press cuttings, reports from SPR members, and letters from various people. It's all very exciting for a history nerd like me, getting a fresh folder from an archivist that no one's probably looked at in over 100 years is very interesting and exciting. Also, Cambridge is a very beautiful city to spend some time in. I'm hoping to find maybe a haunted pub for a pint or two whilst I'm there. Let me know if you've got any recommendations for beer or ghosts. For Wyke, I can see from the online catalogue entry that the files include a letter from friend of the podcast, John Arthur Hill. Now, those of you who've been listening from the start might remember he featured in the Keithley story. He was an eminent figure in the world of spiritualism and the SPR. As I mentioned in that first series, he coined the term out-of-body experience in 1918. He lived in Halifax, so it's not surprising he took an interest in what was going on in Wyke. It will be interesting to see what he made of the story, whether he visited to investigate or whether he just commented on it. We'll see. I'll probably do a special episode on the Keithley files, so like a Series 1 update, and then hopefully the others will have lots of viable information for future series. Keep an eye on the Poltergeist Project Facebook page. I'll put some content through there about my research trip, so you'll get first look at the kind of material that are within the folders. I'll also mention that I was recently interviewed by Brett and Lee from the Beyond the Veil podcast. They're really nice guys. They came over to meet up and we had a really good chat about all things paranormal, covering my background and history, some of my experience in a professional sense. We also go through some of the series so far and just our general thoughts and chat about Poltergeist and what might be going on. So make sure you check out their podcast and subscribe. It's my favourite kind of paranormal podcast, really. It's good, no nonsense, sensible look at the supernatural and unexplained. It also has lots of really good historical insight provided by historians such as Mike Cavell. The interview will be released by them first in August. Then I'll put a version out as well from the Poltergeist Project channel, so keep an eye out for that. As always, it's a huge thanks for listening. Like, share, subscribe, comment, get in touch at the Poltergeist Project Podcast at gmail.com. I would love to know what you think of this story. But for now, goodbye.